Imagine sitting down to watch a classic Japanese variety show on a global streaming service. You're expecting the wild, unpredictable energy that's defined Japanese comedy for decades. You expect the slapstick, giant paper fans, over-the-top costumes, and that chaotic, infectious laughter. This is the spirit of manzai, a style rooted in rapid-fire banter and physical gags, which has been a staple of Japanese TV since the 1950s. But something's off. The picture is blurry, the sound is quiet, or the whole joke is missing. Maybe you remember a famous skit from Gaki no Tsukai or Shimura Ken's Bakatono-sama, but now the punchline is gone. For longtime fans, these changes are super obvious. The comedy feels too clean, its sharp edges dulled. The wild, sometimes controversial humor that once pushed boundaries is now softened or even erased. This isn't just a few small changes, it's a big shift in how Japanese comedy reaches the world. In the past, comedians like Beat Takeshi or Ken Shimura could get away with edgy, sometimes shocking material. Now, even classic shows are edited for safety. These shows, once raw and real, are now carefully picked and changed for people all over the world. Editors cut out jokes about sensitive topics, blur faces, and mute sound effects. Sometimes entire segments disappear. Big streaming companies have brought Japanese comedy to everyone, but with new rules and expectations. What was once local and unfiltered is now global and sanitized. What happened? A censored, safe version that makes us ask tough questions. Who decides what's too much? Are we losing what makes Japanese humor special when it's translated? Is it possible to share the heart of Japanese comedy without losing its soul? The problem isn't a mistake. It's the world trying to share laughs without losing what makes them unique. But as Japanese comedy transforms for a global audience, we have to wonder, are we preserving its legacy or erasing its edge? So what exactly is being cut and how do people feel about it? First, physical comedy. Like Batsu games, where comedians get hit for losing, often gets blurry, muted, or disappears entirely. For example, a pie-in-the-face gag might be pixelated, or a slapstick fall cut out, especially if it looks too rough for international standards. Jokes involving blackface or exaggerated foreign stereotypes are blurred, removed, or replaced with a warning label. For instance, a famous skit from Downtown no Gaki no Tsukai featuring blackface was cut entirely on Netflix, sparking debate online. Jokes about gender and sexuality, especially drag performances or onikiara acts, are often marked, muted, or cut. In some cases, entire segments featuring drag queens are removed, with streaming platforms citing sensitivity to LGBTQ+ issues. Even small things, like brand logos, swear words, or sharp insults, are cleaned up. Subtitles might swap out a harsh insult for something milder, or mute a comedian's outburst entirely. Each small change chips away at the show's original feel. Comedians have spoken out, saying their intent is lost and their jokes fall flat. Fans online complain that the edits make the humor confusing or bland, especially for those familiar with the original. The result? A version stripped of its most challenging, controversial, and culturally specific parts, leaving both comedians and audiences frustrated, and raising questions about how much of the original comedy survives the cut. To truly understand why Japanese comedy feels so unique, we have to look back at its deep cultural roots and how it's evolved over centuries. Japanese humor draws from traditions like rakugo, a solo storytelling art dating back to the Edo period, and kyogen, comedic plays performed alongside no theater. Modern comedy, especially manzai, features the boke and tsukomi dynamic, where the funny man makes silly statements and the straight man corrects or playfully slaps him. This isn't real fighting, it's a stylized exchange rooted in centuries-old performance, emphasizing timing and trust. Batsu games, where losers face silly punishments, are exaggerated and theatrical. Everyone knows it's all in good fun, much like slapstick in Western vaudeville. Over decades, a strong bond of trust has formed between performers and audiences, allowing for jokes that might seem risky elsewhere. Many jokes play on social roles, like the strict boss or the dutiful housewife, reflecting a society with shared experiences and expectations. Jokes about gender or foreigners are often based on local stereotypes, not intended as political statements, but as reflections of Japanese society's own quirks. Experts point out that while some Japanese audiences are critical of these jokes, they don't carry the same historical baggage as in Western countries. Cross-dressing and drag have long histories in Japanese entertainment, from kabuki's onnagata to modern TV, seen as playful rather than derogatory. But when these shows reach global audiences, the humor can seem outdated or offensive, even if that's not the intent, highlighting the gap between local context and international perception. As one expert puts it, Japanese comedy is like an inside joke for the whole country. When it goes global, misunderstandings are almost guaranteed. Audience reactions range from confusion to delight, showing just how much context matters. The big change? Global streaming platforms like Netflix, Amazon, and Disney Plus have completely rewritten the rules for Japanese comedy. These companies want to avoid controversy and reach the widest possible audience, so they enforce strict, often Western-centric content guidelines. For example, Netflix's global policy bans hate speech, stereotypes, and potentially offensive humor, while Amazon's guidelines flag cultural insensitivity and risky jokes. Instead of tailoring content for each country, platforms use a single, cautious standard, usually the most sensitive one. Industry insiders say this one-size-fits-all approach often means Japanese humor gets lost in translation or is cut entirely. Content review teams flag anything that might offend, slapstick, stereotypes, or even jokes that are just considered risky. One Japanese comedian shared, "We had to cut a whole sketch because it was too local for global audiences." Japanese TV channels once focused only on local viewers. Now, global platforms have the final say. Directors and writers must submit scripts for approval, and sometimes entire scenes are reshot or removed. The impact? Japanese creators feel their voices are filtered, and their work is changed before it reaches the world. Viewers notice too. Many complain that the shows feel watered down, or not truly Japanese. The rules of comedy have changed. Now, the final decision isn't made in Japan, but in boardrooms thousands of miles away, leaving both creators and fans wondering what's been lost in translation. When it comes to Japanese comedy on streaming platforms, three main types of humor face the most censorship: physical punishment, jokes about gender and sexuality, and racial caricatures. Each has its own history, context, and controversy. First, physical comedy, like the infamous Batsu games on Gaki no Tsukai, where comedians are slapped, hit, or pranked for laughs. In Japan, this is seen as slapstick fun, rooted in traditions like manzai and variety shows. But on global platforms, these scenes are often blurred or cut entirely, out of concern for promoting violence or bullying. Some Japanese comedians argue that these punishments are exaggerated and consensual, meant to be absurd rather than harmful. Critics, however, point out that international audiences may not understand the context, leading to misinterpretation and stricter moderation. Second, gender and sexuality humor, like drag performances or the popular one-ekiara, where male comedians play flamboyant or effeminate characters. In Japan, these acts are often celebrated and have a long comedic tradition. But streaming platforms, wary of offending global viewers or reinforcing stereotypes, sometimes flag or remove these sketches. Comedians say these characters are part of Japan's unique comedic language, not meant to mock but to entertain. Yet, critics abroad worry about perpetuating outdated or insensitive portrayals, prompting platforms to err on the side of caution. Third, racial caricatures, especially blackface, are almost always removed. While some older Japanese shows used these portrayals without malicious intent, the global history of blackface as a tool of racism means streaming services take a zero-tolerance approach. Japanese critics acknowledge the lack of awareness about blackface's history in Japan, but international audiences and advocacy groups see it as deeply offensive, leading to swift removal from global platforms. Content moderators are trained to spot these three pillars: physical punishment, gender and sexuality jokes, and racial caricatures, often following strict guidelines set by international standards. The intention is to make content accessible and safe for everyone, but this broad approach can erase the cultural context and meaning behind the humor. As comedians and critics point out, What's funny and acceptable in one culture may not translate in another. The question remains, can Japanese comedy survive these edits and still be understood abroad? The answer is complicated. What's clear is that these changes are reshaping what global audiences see and what they miss. As more content is filtered, comedians and critics worry that the heart of Japanese comedy, the context, the intent, the cultural nuance, could be lost in translation. Here's the surprise. Japanese viewers still get to watch the full unchanged shows on TV in Japan. In fact, over 85% of Japanese households regularly tune in to variety and comedy programs, according to a 2023 survey by Video Research Limited. The Batsu games and controversial skits air as usual in Japan, with little pushback from domestic audiences. As one Japanese viewer put it, "It's part of our culture. We know it's all in good fun." Meanwhile, people around the world see the cleaned-up versions. A 2022 case study by Netflix found that 60% of Japanese comedy shows on their platform had scenes altered or removed for international audiences. This isn't about Japan changing, it's about how content is filtered when it's sent to other countries. Japanese producers say, "We make shows for our people first. What happens after is out of our hands." International streaming companies apply their own standards, often to avoid backlash or meet local regulations. This can mean muting jokes, blurring faces, or cutting entire segments. Japanese TV channels serve local tastes and rules, and they don't have a reason to change for now. Domestic ratings remain strong, and advertisers continue to support these shows. But as global streaming grows, international viewership of Japanese comedy has doubled in the last 5 years. Creators face new challenges and opportunities. Censorship happens after the show is made by international companies, not the original creators. Some international fans say, "We want the real thing, not a watered-down version." But as global streaming grows, Japanese creators might feel pressure to censor themselves from the start. The risk? Comedy that becomes boring for a global audience, losing its special, wild spirit. Some see opportunity. "If we can find a balance, maybe more people will appreciate our humor," says one writer, but others worry about losing what makes Japanese comedy unique. Fans worry that trying to reach more people could make what makes Japanese comedy special less unique. As one international viewer wrote, "I want to experience Japanese comedy as it really is, even if I don't always get the joke." The divide is real, but so is the passion on both sides. The challenge now? Finding a way for Japanese comedy to stay true to itself, while reaching a global audience hungry for something different. Censorship on global platforms makes us ask a tough question. What's next for comedy in a connected world? But for many creators, these challenges are sparking new waves of creativity. Being more sensitive can help include everyone and push creators to try new things. Some Japanese comedians are now blending slapstick with clever wordplay or using animation and visual gags to cross language barriers. But having just one set of rules risks making cultural differences flat and stopping creativity. As one creator puts it, "We want to share our humor, not just fit into a mold." Instead of just cutting content, platforms could give more information, explain the joke, the tradition, what it means. Some shows now add pop-up notes or bonus interviews to help global viewers get the context. Treat viewers as smart enough to understand, not just needing protection. Fans are already building communities to share and explain the jokes themselves. The talk about Japanese comedy is part of a bigger conversation. Should we make humor the same for everyone, or celebrate how different it is, even when it's messy? Many predict the future will see more hybrid formats, with Japanese comedians collaborating internationally and experimenting with new media. The future of laughter depends on how we answer that question. And in the age of global content, creativity is finding new ways to thrive.